Thanks, Debbie, and thanks to all of you all for coming out on a beautiful Saturday afternoon on Father's Day weekend to celebrate this with us. It's something I think is very cool and very worth celebrating, and thanks to the library for this use of this cool auditorium. We're celebrating the 20th anniversary of the release of Cracked Review, Hootie's major label debut for Atlantic Records. There's a lot that Soni and I could talk about. We could sit up here and reminisce for hours about this. We don't have much time. But before we get into it, I want to give a little background on the album. And I think when you hear this, you might see that this was a pretty important recording. On May 25th, 1995, this is a year after it came out, Cracked Review hit #1 on the Billboard charts for the first time. And during that week, 125,000 copies of the record were sold. During the first week of July, 170,000 copies were sold. And weekly totals through August of 1995 fluctuated between 162,000 a week to 184,000 a week. And Cracked Review appeared in the top 10 every week from February 20th, 25th to September 30th. And from April through September that year, it never dropped lower than #3 on the Billboard charts. At the end of September, Cracked Review made its 5th return to #1 in Billboard. It was the first time an album had ever done that since the soundtrack to the movie South Pacific did it in 1959. And it was also the biggest selling album of 1995. So it's a very remarkable recording. And for me, that's why I think this is a very cool thing to do, to remember it on its 20th anniversary. But you know, all those numbers are great and cool, and we talk about stats and being #1, but the thing that I think makes this record most special for me is that the 4 guys who wrote it and recorded it and made it, they came together in my hometown, and they went around the world for 3 or 4 years in the mid-90s playing to huge crowds in cities, and I never will forget the summer of '95 when I went out with you guys a couple times and played a show, and 18,000 people in Kansas City, 20,000 in St. Louis, and every night they would say, "Hello everybody, we're Hootie and the Blowfish from Columbia, South Carolina." And it just gave me a real chill every time that happens. Because everybody would cheer, and I said, "Hey, Columbia's a cool town. I tried to tell y'all." So with that, we're just going to kind of jump into this thing, and we're going to, like we're saying, it's 1994. You guys signed with Atlantic Records a few months earlier, back in October of '93, and you're going to make your debut in California. So you're flying out there in March. You're getting on the plane to fly from Columbia. Tell us what you were feeling at that moment to head to California to. Was it excitement? Were you a little nervous about it, or were you just ready to go have a good time?
Well, thanks, Mike, and thanks everybody for being here today. Again, I've been blessed to be able to go back to a piece of journalism here, self-journalism, a diary that has helped me to get to the bottom of some of these questions that Mike has been asking me for the last week or two in preparing for this. And we had a good time earlier this week paging through here to figure out exactly what the feelings were then. My memory, which is poor, and going back 20 years is even more inaccurate, wasn't going to help me much. I had kept a diary from the day we left till the day we came back from California, which is about almost a month and a half, 2 months for us. And so we'll refer to the sketchbook a few times for some notes and save my memory. That time was a big time for us because it wasn't our first or second attempt at a big record deal. We had signed a deal a couple years earlier, driven to California, which should have been our first sign that the record label stunk. Just drive there and we'll give you your check. And it failed. And we, probably at that time, most bands would have broke up, and we decided to persevere. Within a couple more years, we had signed from Atlantic, and our first attempts to go out there was squashed in January by the LA earthquake. So they pushed us back, which we thought, well, maybe we're just never meant to go to LA to record a record. We've had a nasty record label and then an earthquake. By March, we did in fact make it out, and we set off, encouraged, a little nervous going to California. We felt a big cultural change and somewhere where we'd never spent a lot of time, with the exception of going out to sign a stupid record deal years earlier. Page 1, we'll go to the book immediately here because I call it Columbia Metropolitan Airport, as if it's like the hugest thing in the world. And this is 94. I don't even know if they had direct flights anywhere other than Charlotte or Atlanta in that year. We were able to get out, but I say after setting a Columbia Metropolitan Airport record of 28 checked items and 14 carry-on bags, we had a smooth departure to the west, because we carried all of our guitars, including bass guitars, acoustic, and electric, all out there with us. We had basically just the band and a couple crew guys, but we had a lot of baggage to go with us. And, we're excited.
I wonder if that record still stands, 44 check bags.
I don't know. They didn't charge for them back then either, and they didn't go through them, thankfully. But
so you get to California, and they put you guys up in a condo in San Fernando Valley, right? And as you can say, here's where you can stay, but you were going to record the album in a studio in North Hollywood. And like you say, you guys had done some recording before, right? And by the way, this journal's pretty amazing. If anybody make a major label record, I recommend keeping a day-to-day journal on what you do. It's really fascinating. It was a good idea that you were thinking ahead to do that. That's
I apparently didn't have many friends. I just sat around and wrote in my damn journal all the time. Today
So you get to in California, go in the studio for the first time, and what was your first impressions of you'd been in studios before? Was this a different experience? Was it a much higher level to what you had recorded before when you got to this NRG?
Yeah, we had a lot of pressure to go into the San Fernando Valley with a producer named Don Gaiman, who had produced all the John Mellencamp hits of the 80s. He was a big name producer, and we went in with a major record label, Atlantic Records, that had produced some of the greatest hits of all time. And we knew it was costing a lot, being funded by the record company. And the biggest studio we'd ever been in was the size of this stage. Before that, we went in Reflections up in Charlotte and did an EP there. But so we felt like this was a lot of pressure. On the flip side, we had a batch of 35 songs that had been road tested for anywhere from 6 months to 4 years. In other words, we got to play these songs, interpret audience reaction, and see if these were good songs. And the cream rose to the top during those years. And those testing years, those paying the dues, are what made us comfortable and knowledgeable about how to play our instruments in any environment. We go in with Don Gaiman. And of course, he's a gentle man. He's a big producer, but we had surrounded ourselves with two people who were like-minded.
Don Gaiman and Tim Summer the other year, he was your Atlantic Records.
What do they call those people?
A&R rep.
Artist and repertoire.
Yeah, so we're going to talk for a second about Don Gaiman, who produced the album. He, like Jim said, he produced Mellencamp things. He produced REM's Life's Rich Pageant. But he had some great quips in here about Don Gaiman. First off, probably some people might, I thought of this morning, some people might not really know what the producer does. I mean, can you briefly just, quickly, what's the role of the producer in an album, basically?
He does more than just turning the knobs behind the big sound desk, which is important. They have ears that are millions of times more sensitive than a musician, even a good musician. They hear frequencies. A lot of them are very adept at arranging songs as well as getting the right sounds, and mainly their ability to communicate with a group of musicians that have written and performed together. He can't come in like a fifth wheel and just blow everything up. He's got to be able to nurture this, yet he'd really never hung out with us at length. What he heard was songs that had a good pop sensibility, and his job was to have them produced to sound big and sort of worthy of big-time radio and unique at the same time. He had pressure. He was getting paid a lot of money from a record company, and he hadn't had hits in a little while, so his value was a little down after Mellencamp and some blank years. So his job was to go in there and not screw it up in some ways. So he had the four of us and a lot of good songs to choose from, but bands are about the most dysfunctional of any groups of people around. So it's easy to go in there and things fall apart. We were a little different. We had seasoned recorders, even if just small recordings. We'd been around. We'd played a lot of shows together live. So he wasn't working from scratch, but you know, it is frightening getting in a big studio with somebody new because you just don't know what they expect.
You had a great quip in here. You call him a parser of verses. And it's meaning apparently he did some editing, and I think he said in an interview that you guys were you were a live band when you came in the studio. You'd been playing in bars and clubs, and you played these songs, and you knew them. But he immediately saw that a 5 or 6 minute song had to become, like you're saying, a 3 minute.
Don Gaiman taught us how to make a pop song. That's exactly right. We were used to playing bars, so you'd have a little longer jams, and he wanted to squeeze these songs down to between 3 and 4 minutes. So we were forced to look at arranging songs for the first time ever. The 4 of us as band members and songwriters never had a first lesson. We just did what we thought was right in writing songs, which usually meant combining or bringing in a song and having the other band members add their parts to it. Don taught us the first time ever about a pop song, and a great one being a series of 5-second exciting bits. I thought, what the hell does that mean, Don? I don't even know what you're talking about. And he had another language. He's from California. He'd been producing for years. He was just one of these granola guys who drank weird vegetable smoothies and more moccasins and we don't even know. But so he was telling us about this idea of a pop song, and one that's catchy has to have these moments, and they need to happen over and over again for about 3 or 4 minutes. And that got us to thinking a little bit about our songs. We held them tight. We'd been playing them a long time. We loved them. And rather than fall in love with thinking they were perfect as they were, we allowed Don to tinker with them a bit, and that he did.
Yeah, you mentioned something just a second ago about how he nurtured the 4 of you guys through this whole process. And you told me something, an anecdote out of your journal about one time he asked someone else to play a percussion track, a bongo track, or maybe a conga drum track, and you were just slightly kind of hurt by that.
I was like I had a big ego or something. I don't know. I'm sarcastic, by the way. Most of what I say is sarcasm. So, Don had an ability to take 4 kids in their mid-20s who'd been playing together and show them how to get better without demeaning us, which some producers do. So instead of saying, after taking a vocal track in the studio booth, you'd say, okay, cut. Instead of saying, that sucked, or you need to do that again, a good producer has a way to nurture you and say, well, you weren't quite sharp enough, or, which is another way of saying it, you're flat. Or he said, I had some difficulties in the booth, let's do that again, even if it was your fault. So Don was good. He had a very strong vocabulary and a lingo that allowed him to talk to us and make us comfortable. So that was important with Don.
So you're out there and you get in, you settle in, and you get down to work. And I think you said that you guys worked in the studio recording Cracked Review 5 days a week, and then had the weekends off. So I know it probably varied every week from day to day, but kind of the other fun thing I thought you said this was the first time in your memory that you could remember Hootie and the Blowfish actually getting up at 9 o'clock in the morning and going to work.
We didn't choose our jobs for no reason. None of us liked the mornings particular. Even in college, Darius worked at a record store. Dean worked at a bar. I think I was the only one with Mark that actually had morning hours. So you had to go out there and get up early and have a discipline was a little new to us.
So what was your day like? A working day in the recording a major label record? Was it?
We would get our workout in the morning. We had an apartment with 2 bedrooms. Mark and I shared a room. Darius and Dean shared a room. So you try and get a workout in, and then make whatever phone calls you could make, because all you had was a cordless phone in your condo. No internet, nothing like that. And then you'd ride off down the street to the studio, and you'd sit in there from about noon till midnight, off and on, and record. We basically wanted to get it done in a certain period, and it was interesting going in there because as a live band, even though we had a few recordings under our belt, it's odd to take that live feeling into a studio where you're used to screaming girls and draft beer being strewn about in a bar at 2 a.m. You're now sitting there at 2 in the afternoon trying to get a saucy groove on, and it's hard. But we weren't going to try and fix that just by drinking in the middle of the day, although that would have been a good idea. We, in fact, had to figure out how to perform and get that energy, and it was Don's job to get it out of us in the middle of the day.
Well, one of the things that I think the critics and all, and you guys too, thought about Cracked Review was that it did kind of capture the Hootie's live sound, or at least the feel of seeing a Hootie performance. And I think, and briefly, just the way you'd recorded it, I think you did pretty much played live in the studio except for lead vocals and lead guitars. Is that?
Yep.
So you might want to explain what that means, like playing. You set up and did the rhythm tracks and all, just like you were playing live.
This studio technology was archaic compared to today's standards, and if anybody thinks the internet had an impact on the world, it also had a huge impact in that technology on recording. Now you can fit in a wonderful home studio with the highest quality in a laptop. Back then you had a board that was the size of the stage, and it was all analog. We recorded to tape. So it was a very old way of making music, but it was a warmer sound, and it was what Don wanted to do. And you would go in and record as a band, live tracks in a big studio, and Darius would sing along, and Mark would play along, but we were mainly trying to record the bass and drums to get solid tracks. And so we did that fairly easily most of the time, and then Mark would overdub guitar parts, and we'd later go on, and Darius would sing the final vocals later that night, perhaps, or 2 or 3 songs at a time.
Let's go ahead and talk about the songs a little bit. You said something a second ago that I'd forgotten. I wanted to ask you about. You said you guys recorded 35 songs while you were out there, or something like that.
No,
or?
we brought in 35. So we've been writing songs since 1988 or 89, and we had a lot of songs that were good, some that had fallen off or fallen out of favor, but they wanted to hear. Something I'd written in my journal was that we called Don Gaiman and Tim from the record label our counsel. You know, it was us recording, but it was really them overseeing it. So nothing was going to pass anything until it passed their approval. And they had professional ears, so we trusted them. But we said that the rehearsal with them was extensive. We sat around for an entire day or two playing every song that we'd ever done. And he said that the time had come to start picking and ditching songs for the album. I felt good playing an old piano ballad, which we hadn't recorded yet, and the newest stuff. And then I called Tim and Don the counsel, and they commented that each and every song that we had any chance of making the album would be played. We had to rehearse it for them. And everybody in the project seemed extremely laid back, and there were no uneasy moments thus far. And that we'd go to the studio, and what the heck, we were just trying to prepare ourselves mentally for a big moment in our lives.
So they kind of did a little, not a thumbs up or thumbs down on songs, but just one. I like that one a little better than the last one. And so you basically kind of started picking the songs that were going to go on the album after the rehearsals kind of thing.
Absolutely. And there was some crushing blows as a songwriter. I would bring in a song, and it would be my song, and then the band would add their flavor, or Darius would do that, or Mark, or whoever. And I had some favorites that did not make the album, as did other band members. And it can be a blow to the ego to be in front of the big producer and the big record label guy, and you just finished playing the song that you had written, and I go, nah, that's not going to make it. Oh, so crushing. But some did.
So, okay, the album ended up with 11 songs, and we'll just kind of briefly go song by song and just come in Hong Kong. That's the security guy. Hannah Jane was the first song on the album. That was, I think Darius wrote, that song is written about, or the name of the song is named after Chris Carney's daughter.
Yep.
Who was, Chris Carney works at Fishco, has for many, many years, and his daughter, Hannah Jane, he was Darius's roommate in college. So was that a Darius song pretty much?
Darius wrote all the lyrics. It was music that I had brought in earlier, and he added all the lyrics, and Hannah Jane was the name of it It's about his experience of seeing his good buddy having a baby when he was, basically they were still in their early or mid-20s, and Hannah Jane just graduated USC, which makes me feel real old.
Which puts this 20-year anniversary.
Yes, that makes sense.
Yeah. Now, Hold My Hand. That was.
Well, I'm going to read you read you something that will put recording music in perspective back then, because the process of getting the drum and bass tracks can be quite quick. The process of the rest of it happening can be quite slow, which means me and Dean, the bass player, have to sit on the side and either pick our nose or find something more interesting to do. And I write, day 8, one word for this day in the studio, Hannah Jane. All day, all night. Guitars, 1 guitar, 2 guitar, red guitar, blue guitar. The singing Blowfish sisters, take 4. But for every guitar take that Mark had, we had a good game of pool. 1 ball, 2 ball, red ball, blue ball. After 2 hours of pool table and guitar tracks, we decided to commence drinking. Late night at the condo. It's convenient, comfortable, and economical too. That was a day in the studio. You record a song that you've probably played 500 times already in bars, and you've got to sit there and record it in a studio and then watch most of it take place while you...
And probably play parts over and over and over. I guess recording it like anything else, it can get a little monotonous at times or boring. But matter of fact, I was going to talk about that in a second, about another song, because you had a great quip in here. But so Hold My Hand. So that's basically your song, right? You wrote Hold My Hand?
That would typify a song that I brought in to the band early in 1989, and had written it here in Columbia with an acoustic guitar, and I was still playing in both Tootie and Hootie, which I heard some people laughing. Is that funny? Did I get the two of the silliest band names ever to encompass my entire life of music? So the first recording of Hold My Hand actually took place in Orangeburg with my buddy Tootie in his living room as we set up a little 4-track recording studio to record this. I said, well, we're not playing this weekend. Let's just record this little song I've written. And so we recorded it then, but Hootie started playing it. It was always a crowd favorite live, and we knew it had a good chance of making the record. And I think I had written here something about Hold My Hand, but I'm going to have to find it now. Hold My Hand, where'd it go? Where did I take that from, Mike?
I was going to ask you...
you can ask me more while I'm finding it.
Yeah, well, about this song, the thing that I thought was great was David Crosby sang on this song in the studio of Crosby, Stills, and Nash. And matter of fact, if you listen to the song closely, you can hear Crosby's voice underneath on a couple of those things where he carries a note a little further, and you can clearly hear David Crosby. I always thought that was cool. Can you find the anecdote about Crosby that you had a great... Because apparently he...
David Crosby
gave you guys some life lessons in the studio.
We were excited. It says, if you would have told me that, this is day 28, if you would have told me that someday David Crosby of Crosby, Stills, and Nash and Young would sing on one of our songs, of course we would have doubted it. But today it happened, exclamation points. We were nervous because we didn't know what to expect from this rock icon. An attitude, almighty wisdom, professional approval, or nothing at all. What we got was a great vocal track and constant laughter at his humorous impersonations. As a recovered alcoholic and drug addict, I was amazed, talking about him, I wasn't recovered yet. I was amazed at his constant satirical references to drugs. After only 5 minutes behind the microphone, he quirked, I'm feeling a little perky this afternoon. Could somebody bring me some smack and a few lewds? Classic rehab humor, I guess. So we were certainly in awe of somebody like that. That was a dream come true. It took a little bit of the monotony of recording a song, once again, that we had played 6,000 times. It took that monotony away, and we got to sit there and listen to David Crosby tell us some very meaningful things about the business, one of which was learning to separate the music from the music business, which was something we'd never considered. We'd had a few bad record deal already, but we were still artists at heart. We didn't have much in the, what's the opposite of the artist mind? Logic and math, I suppose. We were out there in the dreamy world of artists, and he said, learn to keep those separate. That artist mind and the music that's in your heart, the music that got you to this studio in California, remember that. That will carry you on all of your life if you keep it there. Don't let that be interrupted by the music business, which is also integral in a lot of it, but that'll mess you up. And he'd been around. He'd signed more record deals than I'd had sleepy nights.
It was so neat to have him. It gave a credibility to a band all out of the chute. Well, David Crosby sang on their record, so that was
Don Gaiman had the idea to bring him in because we needed to give ourselves any chance at notoriety possible. So having a famous singer on one of our songs was one way to do that.
Now, Let Her Cry, I always picture, when I hear Let Her Cry, I think of Darius walking home to Shandon after being in a barn 5 points and being upset. So is that Let Her Cry was a song that he wrote or you collaborated on? One thing I'll talk about real briefly, too, is how Hootie wrote songs. I mean, we've already kind of hit on it a little bit, but like Darius will bring in a set of lyrics or an idea, and you'd write some music. Is that how it kind of worked? One person has an idea, and all four kind of collaborate?
Sure. We didn't, like I said, we weren't formally educated. I think Dean was the only one who could read music, and so we just made it up as we went along. We knew what a good pop song should sound like. We knew it should have good rhythm and repetition and some meaning, and so we just did it as we went along. So a lot of the songs we wrote in those early days that ended up on Character Review were written on the front porch of our apartment on Green Street or up in Gregg Street or any of the various places, little dumpy places we had lived at the time. And Let Her Cry was one that Darius had brought in, and it sailed right into our consciousness as far as, wow, we all put our parts in it, Dean and Mark and I, and it was immediately a song that got a lot of attention playing the clubs. People had never heard it before, but they knew when they heard it that it was something special. So when we got there, that was on the long list.
You mentioned in here, I thought it was interesting, a few of the mentions of Let Her Cry in your journal. You talked about one day you were just like, oh gosh, we got to play more of those parts for Let Her Cry again, and you just kind of blew it off in your head. It's kind of the boring part of recording an album, and then it goes on to be, this huge hit. It was like you didn't really spend as much time, it sounded like, on Let Her Cry as maybe some of the other songs.
It's a short paragraph in the journal. It says, tracking continues today on day 12, and we worked on Let Her Cry, mostly. And we finished it in that quick day. It wasn't the most thrilling of days, but we got some good work done. Yeah, and I put wow with an exclamation, which I think is my way of saying, even though it's a song we've played many times and we recorded it essentially as we've played it live for many years, it still hit me just about every night. Oh my gosh, I'm in a studio in the Valley recording for Atlantic Records. And that was a big thing for us. We knew that there was a big impact.
Yeah, I thought that was something that you just kind of worked on it in a day and recorded in like a couple of sessions, and then it becomes this humongous hit. It's one thing you never know, right? Okay, let's 11 songs on the album, and you told me that, like I say, out of the 11, 9 of them were pretty much songs that you had played a lot, but there were 2 songs on the record that were they written in the studio or kind of created in the studio? Or
I say that all those songs were road tested, but in fact, there were 2 songs that we never actually played live, and one of them ended up on Character Review. It's called Not Even the Trees. It's kind of a favorite for a lot of people, and Dean had a catchy hook and some chords, but we had no lyrics. And so when we played it in our rehearsal for the council, they said, oh, that's amazing. I'm like, what's amazing? It's half done. No, that's got a hook. We got to work on that one. I thought, all right, you guys know what you're doing. But so the council says here on day 6, we played, arranged, replayed, rearranged, and overarranged Dean's new song, which was Not Even the Trees, for about 5 hours until we got it where we all hated it. Our new, interesting yet effective way of writing songs. At the end, everyone seemed to be happy enough. And later in the evening, we tried a new one called Go Away, which was a song we recorded that did not make the record. And then, of course, More Beer.
So that had to be actually creating one in the studio a little more nervous than something you'd been playing for a a long time? Or
I wasn't comfortable with it. I liked going in there and knowing that we had songs already written. I didn't want to have a new challenge, which was called come up with a new drum pattern and a new song in front of the council. Let's just use one of the songs we know is good.
Tell us briefly about Goodbye, because you had a lot of mentions of that in your journal, because you call that the piano ballad, right? And,
yeah.
And that's a song you wrote, right?
Goodbye was written actually in the law building on campus. I was doing an internship with from Media Arts, and they had I was an escapist. So if I wasn't doing something specific, I was running off to this piano room to play little chords that I was learning to write songs for my band. And Goodbye was and started in there, but we'd never played it live because it was a piano song. There was really no room for a piano ballad in a bar setting. So we didn't play that until we got to L.A., and I'll find that entry in here somewhere. Somewhere.
Oh, well. But anyway, I thought it was interesting that, you had played that song for a long time, and that was the first. You'd never recorded it before either, right?
Never recorded it, so we went in, and with my clumsy fingers, we, here it is. It says, this is day 19, I might make my piano debut on the album. Cross my clumsy fingers. It's a song that I wrote more than 2 years ago, but it never made it to the Hootie stage. Darius finally has found an inspiration in the song, which I wrote about an ex-girlfriend. I think he contributed some of his own personal pain and thoughts to make it special to him. We took it on take number 2. And then we went to In-N-Out Burger for some burgers. How about that for an exciting night?
Woo! 2 takes, and you got it right on the second one. That's really good. Okay. Let's see. It took 7 weeks to make Cracked Review, so the album's made. Now you got to come up with a name for it. So
yeah, I found an interesting thing in the discovery of this little journal here. I wrote this in the spring of '94. I haven't looked at it since then. I paged through it a few times when I was moving houses and cleaning closets, but never got into reading the day-to-day. So it was a nice discovery here. But we had a way of naming the album. I knew how we had finally named it and why we had named it, but I'd forgotten the whole process we got into in L.A. because the record company wanted the label, or wanted the name now so they could start working on the artwork. And it says, this is day 13, the search for an album title continues. And we called it Message Party. Someone had that idea. So we started, these are some of the names. Involuntary Abstinence, Memoirs from a Dysfunctional Life, Digging for Trombone, Monica's Reluctance. Any winners in there? So we end up using each night as a way to come up with interesting ideas. We would come home at the end of the night. We called it a message party. We had one recording device called an answering machine. For any of you over 30. And we'd sit down at it with our pens and papers and listen to the messages that someone left us and try and pull out an interesting comment or line. Ooh, that's mysterious sounding. Let's use that. So
that was your message party. You guys sitting around listening to a answering machine.
Listening to that, and we did that for a while, nightly. And I think in the end, one of our message parties, when I write one night, day 19, no message party tonight. No one loves us. Meaning that no one even bothered to call the Blowfish while they were in California on that day. It says, after a grueling day of recording Not Even the Trees, it sounds like we spent like a week in there doing that damn song, we retired for our message party. It was a short one, and we decided we needed to name the album before going to bed. In the past, we've used excerpts from a song or a sentence to put on T-shirts. Some of you may have seen the They Don't Look Like You on the back of an old Hootie T-shirt. So we said the same. We decided we'd try the same for an album title. John Hiatt was in the disc player, and every sentence that he would say, someone would spout out, yeah, oh, that works, yeah, that's great. Until somebody said, and I think it was me, I'll take credit because I have the microphone, right? in a line of his songs, he talks about a character review. What does he say? He says something about
It was from
learning how to love you.
Right, yeah.
And so we used part of that line, looking at life in some cracked rear view was the line.
Right.
So that's how we excitingly named one of the biggest albums of all time.
So you recorded it. It's got a name, and it took 7 weeks to do it. So you fly in home, get home, and the scheduled release is July 5th, 1994. That summer, and you take some time off, and the release day came, and there had a big autograph party at Manifest Records. I remember being out there, and the line, some of y'all piled out of the van and did an autograph session. Later that night at Monterey Jack's was a big listening party that was packed with people. So, the record's released, and it debuts on the Billboard Heat Seekers chart the very next week at #1 in the country. The Heat Seekers chart was a chart for up-and-coming bands, not established artists, so that was a great thing, but it sold right out of the box pretty well. Tell me, the other day you told me something I didn't know. You said that they tried Hannah Jane as the first single, and it didn't kind of catch. Is that?
Yeah, when we came back, we had an album done, but we went back on our way, which was playing clubs in the Southeast and that growing specter up into the Mid-Atlantic, and we were out playing 4 or 5 shows a week and waiting for the record company to tell us if we were huge yet, or if we still owed them money, maybe. We didn't know any more than the man on the street. We were, like I said, we had that artist mentality, that artist mind that told us, keep writing songs, it's fun, go play them, have a great time, and then do it again the next night. So the business end of it was handled by Rusty, our manager, and he at one point informed us that the record label was going to work a single, which was going to be Hannah Jane. But it never took root. And they only said that they wanted a rock song to be the first song that we led with for radio. But apparently it didn't fly, so they went to a song that they felt definitely had some possibilities, which was Hold My Hand, and shot that one to radio. And so radio just immediately started picking up on that song. It just because that's when they say, wait, this song is taking off across the country, and then ask you guys we need a video. Right? And so... Yeah, it started moving up the charts, but once again, it had little impact on us because we were out playing our shows. And so they said, yeah, that looks like it's number, 120. Well, this week it's 118. Okay, we're going to go to Tuscaloosa and play another show. Let us know how that goes. And so we continued, but it did move up, and Hold My Hand had some big jumps that, although they didn't tell us they had big expectations for us, probably would have been irresponsible as a record label. They let us go about our touring, which was expanding. Now when we went to a town, there was actually a radio representative from Atlantic Records waiting, and we'd go visit a radio station and shake hands, kiss a few babies, and maybe play an acoustic song. And we then began paying attention that there were some record sales and movement of that single up the charts. So we were starting to have expectations at that point when we had returned back here. Looking back, this popped in my head last night. I was thinking, 20 years, we're celebrating this 20 years later. What would you think just come to your mind that what made that song catch people's ear so well that summer? Because I mean, it really did. Do you think it's the hook, just the sort of the optimism of the song? Yeah, I mean, I tend to think that one of the things that worked as songwriters and for us and radio at that time is we were in the youth of our songwriting, and there's a moment there when someone is newly writing songs and has an ability and an unbelievable singer. There's a moment there where there's this keen, just naivete that works for you. It's called being simple. Hold My Hand had 3 chords. I knew maybe 6 chords at that time. So it was the simplicity that I had that was in my heart that allowed me to get those lyrics out. It was Darius's ability at that point to sing a song simply instead of making it more complex. Complex songs don't make hit singles. Simple songs do. And I used to think, I heard the Rolling Stones are a 3-chord band. Well, if you only know 3, that's not a bad way to go. That makes sense. Okay. All right.
And stop me if you get something you come across that you want to pass along. Stop me anytime, because I was going to say, because we're getting kind of.
I'm going to say, I'm going to read something here that I found that was interesting about the band. I think it was just about our friendship. It says, day 13, it says, even with the monotony of recording and television and playing pool, it's still fresh just being here. Everyone's moods are upbeat and joyous pretty much the entire time. So as I talk about the monotony of recording, in reality, we're all deep down real thrilled to be in a posh studio in LA recording an album. It says, after waiting 4 more years to get to this position, it'd be hard to erase the smiles from our faces. Even spending all day and all night together hasn't dampened our spirits at all, because we were not only in the studio for 12 hours, but we lived together, and then there's not much time apart. It helps that we're all very good friends. And that was a big thing for us. It was a good thing, so there wasn't as much dysfunction. The dysfunction didn't come in, or any of the infighting or arguing, until there was either women, money, or drugs involved, the 3 things that kill any band. So it was a very simple period for us.
Right. And so you're at, like you're saying, you're back out on the road at the second half of the summer. You're just doing what Hootie normally does. You're playing, Birmingham, New Orleans. You're out playing college towns and clubs, that sort of thing. But on August 29th, something pretty dramatically changed. Atlantic Records got a call from David Letterman's office saying, we'd like to have Hootie and the Blowfish. David wants them on the show. And not only on August 29th did he call, but he said, we'd like to have them next Friday night. You guys were in New Orleans, I think, at the time. And when Rusty gets this call from Atlantic saying, can the fellas come up and play the Letterman show a week from Friday? And Rusty says, well, great, this is the call I've always wanted to hear, but we've got a sold-out show in the township that very night with Treadmill Track Star and Craven Mellon opening. It was going to be the big Hootie homecoming show at September the 2nd on a Friday night. And so I'm going to go ahead and tell the whole story, then I get your reaction to it. So Atlantic Records basically chartered you guys a jet, and you fly to New York and tape Letterman about 4:30, 5 in the afternoon. I wasn't there, so stop me if I get this all wrong. You fly in, I think Hold My Hand was the song that you were going to do. Letterman apparently heard it come driving into work one day and says, who's this Hootie and the Blowfish band? I like this. And so he comes in, I got to have them right now. I can see David Letterman flopping in and doing all this thing. And so Hold My Hand's about 3:15, 3:20 or something, and it had to be like 2:55 or something for the taping of the show. And so you guys worked on it, back in the limo, back to the airport, fly back to Columbia that Friday evening, come in at 9:30, police escort with the sirens going from the Columbia Municipal, down to the township, and you do this sold-out show all in one day. And so what a summer, what a cap to a summer for you guys. What was...
It was typical in one way that we had actually driven in that day, and Mike forwarded me the article he wrote from that period, which also gave me a memory of, we drove in from New Orleans. Like, you guys do your gig in New Orleans, but start driving right after you get off stage, because you've got to come to Columbia to catch a plane to go to New York to do Letterman, to come back and do the sold-out show. So it was a bit of a track meet to make it all happen. But the great thing is that Letterman show did something while we were seeing Hold My Hand rise up the charts and seeing record sales kick in a little bit. That was like taking a hit of some steroids that were good for you, because it brought us to an audience that was bigger than we'd been in front of before. We just went up and flew up in a jet and played our little 3.5-minute song. But what that was doing, unbeknownst to us, was putting us in front of an audience that was massive. And so we didn't have any idea what was about to happen. We were just going to have a TV appearance, yay. And we met some of our record label people in New York. They patted us on the back and said the single's doing pretty good. But we didn't know what that seed, that explosion was about to be created from that Letterman appearance. Because from then on, it began the idea of the numbers Mike was saying were, okay, we sold 20,000 records last week. Oh, this week 24, 28, 37, 57. Like, this is getting real fun. meanwhile, we were still on the road, but it was because of that explosion, it allowed us to take our club shows to that next level.
It had to be fun too. I think Darius said at the time that that Friday was the biggest day in Hootie history. You guys flew to Letterman and played.
It was the longest day, that's for damn
sure.
sure.
It was. Didn't even get a chance to wash your clothes or anything. It was just straight to New York. But to come home and have a sold out township with 3,200 fans of you guys, that had to be a lot of adrenaline just for the hometown, just for the to be in your.
Oh yeah, and thankfully people like Mike write articles about that and interview us, so I can go back and see what I felt like. And this journal honestly has helped me in that way too. It was a long day, it was a blurry day, and it only got blurrier going forward through the months as we had single after single going to the charts. And so to go back and relive this if I didn't have signposts like Mike in my journal, I'd go, I don't remember. I think it was pretty awesome, but I don't remember all the details. And
so okay, we want to say we got a few more minutes, but we want to have a little Q&A so you can ask some questions. Before we do that, I want you to take a minute or two and tell everyone what you're doing now with your music and with your life, because Darius is into the country thing, and Mark's teaching at College of Charleston, doing some things, and I think Dean's ventured into a restaurant, In and Out, a little bit. So, but tell us what you've been doing lately. It's it's fascinating.
We continued putting out records, and somewhere around 2008, after several divorces and a few solo records, and growing up into our 40s and beyond, and we decided we were going to stop touring indefinitely. So I think that happened in 2008 was our last summer tour, and it set us on a new course. Darius had been working on some country music. I'd been having a feeling in my heart after my divorce and 2 little kids that I didn't want to be on the road. And so we had a little get-together, had a big meeting actually, and talked about what we were going to do. And we decided we would indefinitely stop the touring. We would still do shows for our foundation, the Hootie Foundation, and it would also give Darius some time to actually work that country record that he was working on. So it was the 2 of us, I think mainly were excited. Darius would have some free space for that, and I could move on with trying to figure out what my life would look like. And obviously, and for Darius, it changed greatly. He continued to soar up with the success of his country music, which he's still kicking major butt with. I found new love, remarried. My 2 kids went to 5 kids, and so that solidified me as somebody who was going to stay at home a hell of a lot more than be on a tour bus. And my wife encouraged me to continue writing, but to start writing about something that was building in my life, which was my faith in Jesus Christ. So I basically started as a new person in a new genre, but an old songwriter with a newfound heart for new music. And I've been doing that since then. I just put out my third solo CD, but second specifically contemporary Christian work, and that's available on iTunes. So that's what we do. I see Mark a lot. He's still working at the College of Charleston, and Dean is, like you said, in and out of restaurants. I don't know if he's currently in or out, but
well, I think it's great that that you're doing that, and you're still playing music, and you're playing very meaningful music to you. That means a lot to me. So I want to thank you for taking time out today. We're between World Cup games, so we could snatch him away for just a few minutes here.
You forgot about that in the summer of '94. Why we took 2 weeks off in the middle of a great tour, which was so the drummer could go watch the World Cup, which was being hosted by the U.S. that year. So we got to go to Chicago and see a few games.
And I think if you met President Clinton that summer.
We did.
And you played at a function for him, but you made him put the World Cup on the TV.
We were so silly. That was the first taste where we realized a record company had a lot of pull. So here we were just barely into our first single, and the president or the Democratic National Convention had us go play a gig, and we said, well, we can go do it, but we're going to need a 30-foot TV screen so Soni, the drummer, can watch the World Cup game. All right, we'll get that done.
So you knew things were looking up. So
yeah, but I'd love to take any questions, or Mike also about the album or 1994 or really anything to do with anything. If it's not appropriate, I'll just look at Mike and say,
I'll answer it. What the heck? So anybody got a question about anything?
John Hiatt as the man who helps with his lyrics name our album gets nothing. In fact, it's funny, we saw him in concert in LA when we were recording this. I found this in the journal that we went out, but I don't know if we had named it yet. No, he gets the good feeling of about a year or two later when we were doing amphitheater-sized venues, 15,000, we called him and asked if he would come out and do a month worth of shows with us as our opener, which was exciting to us because we're huge fans, and maybe exciting for him to be with some younger guys out there.
And play for some big crowds and get his music out there too. Yeah, you guys were always very devoted to your heroes and also your friends, and you took local bands out on tour with you a lot. Edwin McCain everybody says he kind of rode y'all's coattails, but I think he was an artist in its own right. But you gave so many people a nice little break. Don Dixon was one that you took out on the road with you.
We absolutely defied our record company who wanted to use us as a mechanism to promote their bands, and we weren't into that. And they wanted to have us charge more money for the tickets so they could, make us bigger, quicker, and they could benefit off that. And we said, no, not really. We're going to bring Dylan Fence and John Hiatt and Treadmill Trackstar out on our tours, and because we like them and we want to give them a chance, and Edwin benefited in that same way. And we kept our ticket prices low. I think that first amphitheater show or tour we did was like $22 for a seat. So we just always wanted to make it accessible to our fans, and we continue to try and do that today. Not from John Hiatt. That would be a twist, though, wouldn't it, if John Hiatt had come up with the name? No, it was actually right back to the cool city of Columbia, South Carolina, when Darius and Mark and Dean were in a dormitory in 1986 or something along there. Darius had two friends. He was the king of nicknaming people. So if you wanted to stay on Darius's good side in college, or you get some hideous nickname like Blowfish or Hootie, and these are two guys that he had named that. I'm sure there was other people that got even worse names, but they decided that would be a good name for a band, or at least catchy, and it kind of stuck.
I think those two guys maybe were guys who sang with Darius in the
Carolina Alive.
That's what it was called. Yep. And they kind of walked in the room one day, and Darius goes, "Hey, look, there's Hootie and the Blowfish." There you have it.
If it wasn't a fraternity or sorority mixer, which were places that actually paid real money, we would play the Elbow Room, which was down in 5 Points, and it was also about the size of this stage, I think. We would play Rockefellers, but we didn't even have much success there. It was a small club, but they were booking national acts, and the booking agent, Art Burke, wanted to keep national acts in there, and we were just a stupid little frat band, I think, to Art in some ways, until we started drawing numbers, and he started, I think, respecting it a little more and seeing that he could benefit from it as well. We did some other stuff. We did St. Patty's Day a bunch of times, even as a small band. We did a few charity gigs. I was talking to a friend out here before the show that we had played a place called BL Roosters and raised, $1,000 to try and help a local charity, and we did that a few times, and it was wherever we could play. We weren't real picky, I'll tell you that, and we tried to be loyal, but there wasn't a million places around to play.
In the 90s, actually, the Rockefellers was the club in town that was going, and this is kind of, Elbow Room kind of kicked in 95, 96, a couple years later, so there really wasn't a lot of venues. I remember you guys in February, we found the poster, which is up in the Cola Rocks collection with a lot of other things, a big poster of Hootie and the Blowfish, playing at the Armory on Bluff Road.
Yep.
And with Rear Window opening, I think.
Rear Windows, yeah.
And the billing on the poster says Hootie's last big show before they leave to go to California to record their major label debut. So I think cover charge is like $5 or $7.
That would have been pricey. The Cockpit was another place that we played where you could probably see us for $3.
It's also too. I always thought that you played some Monterey Jack shows very early on too, kind of.
I think that was real early. Yeah.
Set up in the corner and played it, which was a little restaurant where I don't even know what's there now. What's there now, Ben? It's like they
5 points.
Moosehead Lounge or something. I don't know. That's 5 points for you.
Oh, some of those ones that though we have played them a lot, I was sick of the hits by the time the late 90s rolled around, frankly, because playing them on all the TV shows and all the gigs, it's wonderful being in front of crowds, but after a couple thousand times, Only Want to Be With You could just go away for me. Now, after having some time away from our music and that gruel of the live touring show, I'm loving playing those. I'm loving playing all the songs that we had to play the most. Hold My Hand, Let Her Cry, Only Want to Be With You. Time was another one that was just written up here on Green Street in 1990 maybe. Those songs, after I got away from them a little bit here in the last few years, I'm really enjoying playing those live again to see the faces and go back to that time and have them feel fresh. That feeling of tiredness, which can overcome you after a decade or more on the road consistently, that's gone. I'm blessed with the idea that I can go out and perform and enjoy that bit of nostalgia and have it feel fresh.
How did that affect you personally, Ben, and then how did you process it and how did you feel now?
Well, I always felt, and I think I speak for the whole band, that when we started rising up there and started being invited to events, award shows, or Super Bowl parties, or things that we always felt like, oh my gosh, we were the kids in the candy store. Like, there's Dan Marino, or there's, we got to meet all these stars that we had idolized. So we always felt a little bit out of place. Maybe it was the fact that we were wearing, cargo shorts and Doc Marten boots at a black tie affair, but we always felt like all of a sudden meeting presidents and traveling the world was living out a dream, and we felt separate from it. We never felt like they were our peers, though many of them were our peers by virtue of us being up here in the business. It took years to realize we actually made it up to a level, and we don't have to feel like we're the kids in the candy store. We're actually, sort of succeeded and sustained that level. And we did suffer a bit of backlash, all that momentum that had gained. For any big band that's out there being loved by millions of fans, there are another million that are just so sick of seeing you on the cover of People or turning on a radio station and then getting away from it and turning on, and you're on another radio station. God, I hate these guys. And so we suffered some of that backlash, and some of the first stuff that came was when you start seeing yourself as the bit of the brunt of a joke in a cartoon or a Saturday Night Live skit, and it hurts at first. You're like, oh, I can't believe we got dissed. You get over it, and then you realize it doesn't really mean anything, that you got big enough to be made fun of at some point. Yeah, Old Man and Me. Old Man and Me, which we put on that EP from 92 or 93, somehow was one of our favorite songs then, but did not make the cut for Cracked Rear View. And it was the first single, though, for our second album, Fairweather Johnson. So that was one of those things where we had so many, I think, possibilities for good songs for Cracked Rear View that there were a few that got pushed aside. We continued playing that one live, and then re-recorded it with Dom Gaiman for our second record, and that was the first single. It's Darius brought that song into us, and he always jokes that he wanted it to be a country song, but we wanted to make it a rock song, so it ends up being a straight-up rock song, and it was about him. He seemed to write a lot of songs that had to do with folks in the military or armed services. He had a couple friends, close friends, that were I Will Wait from the album after that was also pertaining to that. I don't know the exact incident, but I know he had ran into somebody who was a veteran and was down and out, and he sort of was reflecting that impact of that person's life. Yeah, we decided, or the record label wanted to promote us on video, which at the time was a VHS tape, and so they followed us around for a few days on that first tour when we went from playing theaters to amphitheaters, which is a big change and frightening experience for us, but we enjoyed it nonetheless, and they followed us around to do a full-length video. I mean, I kind of felt like the Monkees or something goofy, like you could just do anything and there'd be somebody there saying, oh, that's funny, or, you know, do a cartwheel. We'll put that on tape. And they followed the shows as well, but summer camp with trucks was their way of trying to promote us and promote our personal side. And, so that was a lot of fun to do. I think we did another one. I can't remember what it was, though.
That was the name of your tour that summer of '95. Summer Camp with Trucks was the name of the Hootie tour. Oh, yeah. And I think it just goes to show that you guys, you were talking about how you're celebrity and the question, hey, I think that's one thing I've always been thought about you guys, that you never really took what was happening to you for granted. You were always real grounded about it, although had a great time partying, and we all love that part of it, but you knew it was about, you realized that you guys were lucky. You were able to make such a great living playing your songs and playing music that you never took it for granted. And I mean, when you name your tour Summer Camp with Trucks, I mean, it's like, I think maybe Edwin came up with that name. This is like Summer Camp with Trucks. We're out riding around the country in a bunch of trucks.
Edwin McCain did come up with that, now that you mention it.
Anybody else got anything fun to ask? Ron?
How do you mean that highest level? Is that a double entendre? I know how some people maintain that. It's hard not to get up for a performance as you see your audience grow. You know, it is hard. So we, from 80, 89, 90, 91, we felt this groundswell, and then it really exploded through 95, 96, 97, 98. It just kept going up. So it's never hard to get up for it and to get that feeling of nervousness and anxious hope when you hear the roar of the crowd, or you know that it's a sold-out venue along that way. And when it's growing, it's real easy because you're constantly improving and breaking sort of your own personal records and expectations. The harder part is when that downside or the backside of the mountain comes, and it inevitably does for most artists. What do you do? How do you get up for the show when the audience is shrinking? Or how do you get up for the show when the new single from your fourth record is just, gone down and is not on the charts? That's when, as David Crosby told us, to pay attention to that music and not the music business. And that was the importance of that. It's like, what does this song that you've written, that you're out on the road away from your family, mean to you? What does it mean in your heart? Because that's what's going to take you and get you to that high point in a show where you're ready to do it and you're ready to give the crowd your all. If you don't have that in your heart, you got some soul searching to do. So the crowds aren't always there. The record companies aren't always there. And when you get your butt kicked to the curb, I always go back to David Crosby saying, make sure that music is in your heart and don't let the music business get you down. And the music business is the record companies and the fair weather fans, or just reality.
You told me something one time, I think it was you who told me this back in the mid-'90s, that when you guys were on those real big, amphitheater tours, that you kind of looked at it like, there was 2 hours in the day that you really had to be on your best. I mean, and that was that 2 hours that you were on stage. And I always remember that. It was like that, if you just build yourself up through the day and do whatever you have to do. I know you like to work out a lot and run and all to kind of, burn off the stress. But, as long as when you walk out for that first song, you knew you had to give 2 hours worth of time.
And that 2 hours is what is the meaningful part. Yet, in a day of a band who has a record label and a publishing company and a publicist there, the 2 hours are a minimal part of your day, and that's
probably getting away from it all. Those two.
Yeah, right. I'm on stage. Nobody can have to talk to me or bother me. I'm just playing my music. I enjoy that.
Joey.
Well, I've done more reading outside of my own head. I know in my head, I'll never understand what made that happen. I can't even contemplate whether it's 1994, 98, or 2014. It doesn't make sense to me. It never will. We were writing songs and working hard, and we saw tons of bands writing songs and working hard. And they were good songs and they were good bands. Why did that one rise the way it did? I read to find that answer, or I talk to people like Mike Miller who can give some perspective to that, or people at the record company that might say, well, here's why. Well, I didn't know anything about what people were listening to in America at that time. We just wrote what we felt, and it was the combination of the four of our musical tastes. And so I didn't know we were competing against anything. I didn't know about radio promotion people who were out there fighting to make our song more popular, or for record companies that were putting money into it, or videographers who wanted to give us some image. We had no clue of any of that. And so as time goes by, you look at it and you say, oh, here's the climate, and here's maybe why this worked, because here's the environment it was in. And Mike made a point about, the climate at that time of grunge music, and why Hootie might have risen to the top because of the grunge and where they were.
I think that summer when Hold My Hand just took off and the album took off, it was I don't know, and like you say, you can't. It's all speculation and trying to pin something down. But everything was heavier, a little gloomier, not quite as. And here this album comes along by these four guys from South Carolina, and it actually made you feel good. It made you smile, made you happy when you were riding down the road. The songs everything from Time and Only Want to Be With You. They still play Only Want to Be With You in NBA arenas every night. I mean, it's a song that makes you feel good in a time when there wasn't a lot of pop music doing that. And I think it just cut across demographics. Young people liked it. Old folks like me liked it. I wasn't old in '94 though.
You were already old.
I'm still old, but so so yeah, it made people feel good. And I think at the time that's probably why there was a little blowback about it. It was like, oh, those guys are just writing pop songs that you can sing along to, and that wasn't cool rock and roll at the time when you wanted to be Pearl Jam or Soundgarden or something like that, which were the other big popular rock bands at the time. So it was a good feeling record. Vince? That's a good point. It's just real. You have a connection with each other. Yeah.
I was going to say, the numbers are phenomenal. We talked about it. And so then, the impact you guys made in people's lives, and the song you go after, impact at some point, and all my football friends, and the album you guys made is huge people's lives. Is that something that...
It sinks in, yeah, sure it does. I mean, as life goes on and supposedly some amount of maturity sets in, you are able to get some semblance of just sort of what it meant and what it means. I've enjoyed a lot now as I've gotten older, meeting musicians that I really admire that may be younger than me, maybe in their 20s or 30s, that say they listened, that Cracked Review was a huge influence on them. It's guys out, Matthew West, who's a big contemporary Christian artist, one of the best. I met him recently, and he said, man, I wore Cracked Review out. That's what made me want to play guitar and sing, listening to Darius and you guys. That's meaningful, because he's a guy that I respect. So to have someone who was influenced by something I did 20 years ago, and it made him want to play music, that's some perspective for me when I hear stories like that. The elements that made us what we are maybe no different than any other band. We were liberal in a sense. We hadn't been taught. We hadn't been sort of pinned down by formal music training. We were all of the like mind that we enjoyed watching live bands that were real. We enjoyed an array of music that was very broad, considering we came from different backgrounds. So we let all that music influence us. And when it came down to sitting down as a group to write songs, there weren't really many boundaries. We were limited, if anything, by our skill levels. Mark was the most proficient player in the band. He actually knew how to play leads, which was like, whoa. I knew like 6 chords. Darius knew like 2 chords. Dean played bass, and he was very knowledgeable at some types of music other than rock and roll. And perhaps it was that collaboration or letting that all be in the same soup bowl instead of throwing some things out. We said, no, that's all okay. There's no rules. We always thought, we should all check our egos at the door when we're getting together to write songs. In other words, don't be overly critical. Don't hang on to your meaningful, great love lyric as the most awesome lyric ever written. Allow people to, adapt it, like I was talking about in the song Goodbye. You can write a song that's an amazing song, but Darius has to sing it. Therefore, he's got to feel it in his heart. So a lot of that was giving an allowance to the other bandmates to feel what they were feeling and let that be part of the song. So it was that unique mixture. We looked at REM as sort of mentors in that. We knew that they were a group of guys that were just sort of from a college town, weren't that formally trained, wanted to say something from their hearts, all had unique talents, and you could feel that when the music came out. So we looked at them as sort of, that would be something cool to sound like.
Yeah, I think there were some interesting parallels between you guys and REM, although you all were all big fans of REM, but talking about how that sound came, I think you had the ace in the hole kind of with that voice, with Darius's voice.
He's got a pretty good voice, doesn't
he? Could sing pretty good. And so you had this, and it made the song, it gave some real sort of, every song just had a solidifying effect with his voice singing. I remember some of the first things that you said, you started to join Hootie, Mark was saying, you got to hear this guy sing. So there was that, and and Dean too. I think Peter Holzapfel mentioned something to me one time. He tours with these guys when they play. He said he thought that sometimes that Dean was your guy's secret weapon because he was kind of like the Mike Mills of REM. He had such a texture with the way he played. And sometimes I listen to those songs and I hear what Dean's doing. I go, he's driving that little song.
I agree with that. I started listening years later to what Dean was doing on bass, which is not to say I didn't listen earlier, but I listened more closely later and was really impressed and blown away by some of the riffs he was pulling off, because he wasn't sold as like an amazing player, but he was very unique in many ways.
Just a stand-up bass player back there, kind of holding it together. Okay, Debbie's giving me any last question here for Soni before we head out for one more. There you go.
I have a CD. It's called In. And the CD before that is called Found. And if you go to Jim Sonefeld on the internet or on iTunes and click on there, you'll go eventually to iTunes. You can download all those songs and check them out.
Thanks, everybody. I've had a great time. This has been fun.